So we talked a little bit about kind of the American food scene in the 1960s, but there started to be some big names in food around this time. So what was the scene like?
Well, it was. I went to Howard Johnson in 1960, and Mr. Johnson said, "Well, if Jacques wants to work, you know, in our organization, then he has to work in a restaurant to see our system." So I went to Rego Park, the big Howard Johnson in Queens, on Queens Boulevard there in Rego Park, and the whole kitchen was African American, you know, and so I started picking burger too. I mean, I had to, like any kitchen, you gotta prove yourself, you know, show your mark. So all those guys had no idea probably the pavilion who the pavilion was, or the goal, or stuff like this. So, you know, you see the way you have to prove yourself in any kitchen, you know. So I started doing the type of stuff that they were doing it, and great. In a few weeks, I could do as faster than anyone in the kitchen. And that was a good idea. So they were black African American, you know, there in the kitchen, as I said. So coming back to New York, I mean, in New York, all the chefs that I knew in the big hotel, restaurant too, were either French, Italian, Spanish, Swiss, a lot of Swiss, German too. I don't think I knew one white American chef. Didn't exist until the CIA, Culinary Institute of America, starting in the 60s. They were in New Haven before they moved to that Jesuit place in upstate New York in the Catskills, you know. So and at that point they start producing chefs and other schools like Johnson and Well and so forth. And there are extraordinary American chefs now, but not at the time. It was another scene. For me, the scene started because of Pierre and Craig Claiborne had just started at the New York Times, and I think he started in '58, I believe, and that, or maybe '59 even. It was the first time there was a male kind of food editor. I don't even know whether they call it a food editor. It was always someone they took to talk about food. There was no. So Craig made it much more respectable. He kind of invented the vocabulary of food criticism in America and the star system and so forth. So he came to the pavilion to interview Pierre too when I was there too, and I became friends with me. So then I live on 50th and First Avenue. He lived on 53rd. So I met him, and through him, I believe I met Helen McCulley. Helen McCulley was the food editor of McCall House Beautiful. She was a very feisty lady who was never married, didn't have any children. She was from Nova Scotia. And so she kind of became my surrogate mother. I tell you, don't wear those stupid things, don't wear those shoes. Probably fixed me up with Stan Girl at House Beautiful. So, and I started through her doing a bit of writing also, and I was going to Columbia. She pushed me to go to school. But through her, she spoke with James Beard every day on the telephone for like an hour. So within a few months, I knew James Beard, and I remember the first time I went, and James Beard was in here. He was a very large man and with a very hearty appetite, and Helen would do those tiny portions, you know. And I remember one time we were there, one of the first time she served quail. We had one quail. He opened his mouth, swallowed the quail. That was the end of it. We left. He said, "Let's go out for dinner," you know. So James Beard, and then in the middle of the 60s also, Helen told me, "Oh, I want you to look at that. I have I received a review to review a manuscript here." So it was Julia's manuscript, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, and she said, "Well, what do you think of that?" I said, "Oh, it's pretty complete. I think it's good." So she said, "Well, the woman lives in Pasadena. She's coming to New York. So let's. You want to cook?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I always cook at Helen's apartment there. And so Julia came, and Helen told me, "You know, it's a very tall woman. She had a terrible voice." Well, so I spoke French with Julia actually when I met her, because I was here like 6 months or a little more maybe, but French was better than my English. So what I said, I knew the trinity of cooking. You know, James Beard, Julia Child, Craig Claiborne, within a few months after I was there. So the food world was very, very small, very, very small. So all the other ones that I knew were chefs, which were usually, as I say, from Europe or other place, So it was another world than it is now, without any question.
Now, Julia's TV series, The French Chef, premiered in the early 1960s.
64, I believe, yes. After she did. When I met her, no one knew her because she hadn't done television. She had not done a book. Mastering the Art of French Cooking was her first book. And she had never been like the food editor of a magazine, newspaper, too. So she was basically unknown at the time. She just bought her house in Cambridge. I think she bought it in at the end of the 1960, I believe, or 1940. Yeah, 59 maybe. Yes.
Had you considered being on television at that time?
No, I never even thought of it. Television did not really existed much. Julia was on television. It was something different. Then it would change. I remember when I did La Technique, which was my most important book maybe at the time, and that was when I was doing it early 70s, something like that. Julia said, I'm not doing television anymore. That's it, you should go on, show people how to do this. And I remember even at that time, I went to see someone, she sent me the program director at WNET in New York, who said, oh yes, great, we'd love to have you, but a couple of years, nothing ever happened. They didn't raise any money, so it never happened. And actually, the same thing happened with WGBH in Boston. They asked me, they said, oh yeah, we'd love to have you, but as long as no one, it's always PBS raising money or not, and I don't raise money. I wouldn't even know where to start, so nothing ever happened either. Mm-hmm. So when I was asked finally in KQED, I said, yeah, great, but I really didn't expect it to come, but then they raised some money, so.
Mm-hmm. So The French Chef is kind of one of the main American TV shows for cooking that happened. Did you watch the program regularly?
No, I didn't watch it. I think I had never seen that program. I don't even know. At that point, yeah, I guess I had a television, but I didn't even know much about PBS or stuff like this.
Yeah.
And then when I knew Julia, after, yes, I worked, I saw some of the episode, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So then you said you opened La Potagerie in 1970.
Right.
And you started to get better known in the food world at that time as well.
Well, a little bit, I guess, the food. I mean, Nouvelle Cuisine had started, Bocuse in France started Nouvelle Cuisine. I remember him coming and Craig inviting him in East Hampton, in this place, and I would be cooking there with him and Pierre Frenet. On those weekends, Craig invited chefs from all over the world, discovered a lot of women chefs, from Mado Jaffrey in Indian food to Diana Kennedy, to many others, Marshall Hazen, to all of that were discovered by Craig. So weekend. So I would be exposed to that type of cuisine, different also. So that was really very bubbling at the time, very exciting. Yes, and at the 70s, and yes, it was starting, and the restaurant that I opened was a very democratic restaurant, if you want. It was soup, only soup. So we did those kettle of 50 gallons of soup. I had three partners, three of them gambler anonymous, for we were always broke, there was never any money there, because it was all cash. We charged $2.25. You came in, it was new. There was croissant, baguette, and black bread. People could take whatever they wanted. And there was some very attractive young woman that they have with long dress, which will take your tray to take you to the table. So it was kind of a glorified cafeteria, if you want. The whole back of the restaurant was a waterfall, very high table with flowers on top, with begonia. And the flowers, and everyone sit wherever you come. You didn't take a table, So it was large volume. We sit 102 people, and I've done 800 for lunch. A turnover every 18 minutes too. Maybe one of the largest turnover in New York. So people came, they had their tray. They choose out of 3 soup. We put them in beautiful copper bowl. the thick soup like black beans with ham in it, or sausage, stew. There was always a kind of bean soup, then a kind of minestrone vegetable, and a kind of fish soup or meat. So you had a big bowl of soup, your bread, you had a dessert, and often it was a piece of cheese that I put through a fork into an apple. So it was a piece of cheese and an apple, or an apple brown berry, that's it. And a beverage, coffee, tea, whatever. You have beer and a glass of wine for like 40 cents or 50 cents at the time. So, and the whole thing, usually if you didn't have an extra beverage, tax tip was $2.25, something like that. So people come at the end, pay to eat, and came out from another door, and people come in. So it was very large volume. And I was with, I said, those three partners. So I hired people who had never been in the kitchen most of the time, the cook and all that, to train them the way I wanted. I had a small kettle, like a 40, 50-gallon kettle in the basement. And I think the minimum wage at the time was maybe $2.50 an hour, so I gave them $3.50 an hour. Everyone was paid the same way. And in a conventional restaurant, you would have about, your food cost would be about a good restaurant, between 20-25% of the price. Some restaurants is like 40% the food cost. And your payroll would be about also 40-some%. So very often you have a restaurant who has 40% food cost, close to 40% payroll. So they have 20% of the whole volume left to pay indirect costs, which is the depreciation, the location, the depreciation, that, and so forth. So sometimes it's a tight budget. My schedule, I had 16% food costs and 16% payroll. It was an enormous profitable operation on what we were doing. And so actually we were asked to be bought like 4 or 5 times by General Food, by Marriott, but they wanted to buy the system and me. They didn't want to have my partner, who were a lawyer and so forth, but they all wanted to go, so I mean, it was kind of a... But it was a very, very profitable, operation and large volume, and it could be duplicated relatively easily, so... but at that time, they didn't even copyright it, so it... So anyway, I taught the people in the kitchen, which were not professional, how to do those soup. It were all, and again, because of my knowledge of Howard Johnson, all to follow that exactly. Someone will prepare a batch of 50-gallon. I work in 50-gallon batch there of black bean soup, for example. So you had a bag of 50 pounds of black bean, you had 20 pounds of onion, 10 pounds of that, 3 pounds of that. Everyone was prepared on that tray. So the one put it together, 20 minutes, add this, 20 minutes, and so forth, to finish the soup. And we divided into 5-gallon containers. So those 50 gallons was 10 5-gallon containers. Then I had a refrigeration. I invented a system where you take from one side and you push on the other side. Those 5-gallon containers stay on some rack. They slide on the rack, and it was slightly inclined, so you pick up on one side, put the other one, so that the old one come around. So I work out a whole system because of Howard Johnson, except one thing that I didn't realize is that Howard Johnson, we had those 500-gallon container with a steam jacket, which would be transformed into a cooler jacket with ice to cool up the thing, which I didn't have there, which would be very expensive. So I finished those 50-gallon, divided into 10 5-gallon container, and then after I had the other soup, 3 soup a day, that's 30 of those in the basement in New York with the heat and all that. That thing didn't cool off. I had a bath I put ice to cool it up, but it wasn't enough. I said, it's gonna spoil. So then I had a brilliant idea. I mean, for me, it was a brilliant idea at the time. I concentrated my soup. So I put everything in my black bean soup that I'm supposed to have, but instead of 30 gallons of stock in it, or water, I put only 15. So I end up with a soup very, very thick, divided into 10 5-gallon container, and fill the whole thing with ice. So that gave it to me to the 5-gallon that it should be, and cool it off at the time in the refrigerator. So I solved the day with that one. My partner never realized it because they had no idea of cooking. They were lawyers, doctors, who fine. And they were gambler anonymous too, so they took, but there was never any money in that place. So anyway, but it was a very, very profitable operation, worked out well. So,
And you started to make some television appearances around this time. You were on What's My
during
Line?
that time, because of this, I did To Tell the Truth, What's My Line, for some reason, because people came to La Potagerie there. It was on Fifth Avenue between 45 46th Street. So, they asked me one time, I remember I went on, I think it was To Tell the Truth, or What's My Line, one of the two. They took two other French guy with me. One was an opera singer, and the other one, but usually fat guy, big guy, because you're supposed to be fat if you're a chef. So at that time I was very thin, like 40 pounds lighter than now, and so they never guessed me. One was an opera singer, the other one was whatever. I think it was What's My Line, and
I think that was To Tell the Truth, actually.
To Tell the
Yeah.
Truth, maybe as well. So yes, I started getting some visibility this way. It was the beginning of, to a certain extent, social change. From women liberation to organic gardening, health food store. Things were changing during the 60s there at a rapid pace, in a sense. So yes, I got my first taste of publicity, if you want, there.
Were you comfortable being on camera?
Yes, I thought that as long as I was cooking, yes. I remember one time I was with Pierre, and I think it was, what's her name? I forget her name. Very famous. And we, as long as I did something that I knew how to do, cooking and all that I felt comfortable, yes. So, yeah, and at that point I was going to Colombia, so my English was better, and I was used to Colombia. Certainly changed a great deal of my life. It made me even appreciate who I was, in the sense, because at some point I already had a complex about not having an education to a certain extent, and by going to Colombia, then that changed the whole thing. So at some point I may have wanted to, even when I was at Columbia at the beginning, I was going to teach literature or philosophy, and but by the time I finished it, I went back to cooking, but at another level, if you want, because that's what I wanted to do at that point. And I didn't have a complex about not having an education anymore. It was different. So Colombia was very good for me in that sense. Psychologically, if you want, as well. And my English was better at the time, and so starting doing things like that on television, radio, to Helen Macaulay, helped me with that as well, and Pierre, and cooking was kind of exploding a little bit all over the place. After Nouvelle Cuisine came in the end of the 60s and so forth, so it was another world, and Hélène always pushed me to write, so I started writing for House Beautiful under her guidance, and I say, it would be good to see how it's done, so people should picture. So it was the beginning of what I did, La Méthode and La Technique, after, but it was picture the side of a stamp, put there. You couldn't really see anything. But I started doing this, and eventually I did the La Technique book of illustrated manual of cooking technique, So
talk a little bit about how the cookbooks came about, or those two instructional books. Like what led to them?
Well, it came because of Helen, because of Craig Claiborne too, and I was at Craig when Craig was doing a book with Knuff or Random House, or I forget who exactly. And Anne Bramson was there, who was his editor, and I was there. They were doing that, and at that point, Herb Nagourney, who became Anne Bramson's husband, and was the president of the New York Times Book Company at the time, and he told me, "Do you want to do a book with us?" I said, "Well, yeah." I started doing those things at House Beautiful for Hélène, those step-by-step things. So I say, yes, I think we need a book of step by step. He said, fine. come to see me. No, I did another book before, A French Chef Cooks at Home, that they had asked me to do, which was a book of recipe. And I remember that I gave the manuscript for that, and I never heard from them for like a year, so I didn't know what was going on. And eventually, Herb Nagourney there at Knuff asked me if I wanted to do that book of technique. I said yes. But I say I have that other, and of course at the time, in any contract that you had, they put a clause that the next book belongs to them or whatever, so I was entitled. So he said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. So he did somehow, and so I did La Technique, and he said, how long will it be? I said, well, I don't know. I thought in my head, maybe 350 picture and explaining too. And it ended up being like 1,500 pictures, and then he said, well, you have to stop now. So I did another book, La Technique, La Méthode. I changed the name, but it was a continuation of La Technique. Now those are together an illustrated manual of cooking technique, you know. And that I started also because I was starting giving cooking classes at that time, and I realized that people really didn't know. I peel an onion or I peel a carrot or something, and people say, oh, that's how you do it. I said, yeah, I mean, so very simple instructions. So I started with that, and I'm kind of very a bit Cartesian in my mind, so I like to break down and explain, and so that's what La Technique started, and we didn't have any recipe even at the end. It was just an illustrated manual of cooking technique, you know, that La Technique and La Méthode. I eventually did another book called The Art of Cooking, which was also an illustrated manual of cooking technique with recipe to at the end, which was probably the best book that I've done. Probably the one who sold the least. So.
Now, what was the response to La Technique and La Méthode?
Well, it was, at the time, you know, it was quite different than now. There was only a few books published every year. I don't know how many, but maybe 20, 30, 50. I think it was last year where there was 1,200 cookbooks published or one of those things. So it's an embarrassment of riches. So at that point, I got visibility much faster than now. You have some great books who come out, but no one look at them. There is so many. So yes, certainly it gave me visibility, and I had started doing that at House Beautiful, doing those techniques too. We started with Helen McCauley, so I put them out in those books, and I had worked on that for already a year and a half, 2 years. So yeah, it was kind of well, it took time to do it, but kind of an easy thing to do for me. I was talking about what I knew and explaining the way I wanted to, and it was a rewarding type of book for me to do. Yeah.
You mentioned you were doing cooking instructions as well. How did you get into that, and what did you enjoy about the teaching aspect?
Yeah, because in the 60s, you know, women liberation, organic gardening, and all that exploded at the same time, and you had cooking schools started opening all over the country, you know. So, and they asked me, and at that time, I had a very bad accident, and that kind of changed my life forever. It pushed me in that direction of teaching. I had a brace on my leg too, and so forth. So I started teaching in those schools and making a living out of it, and there wasn't that much competition, so I was booked like a year ahead, as many classes as I wanted, and I did like 30, 35 weeks of class, was doing a good living, so that kind of narrowed down also my knowledge, or organized my knowledge to be able to explain properly in class and all that, so I had to break it down in two, and La Technique and La Méthode came out of those type of teaching, you know.
So let's jump into a little bit of your television work. I think there was one other series you were involved in before KQED in Jacksonville, Florida?
Yes.
Is that right?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about what goes into preparing a cooking show for television, coming up with recipes. Yeah,
it was Herb Nagourney actually was the president of the New York Times Book Company, with a friend of mine who was the friend of Anne Bramson, who I did La Technique and la Méthode with him, and eventually they were married. So I did those books with them, and that was an extension to teaching. I mean, I had a very serious car accident, and after that, I wasn't really going back behind the stove as much. You know, I had 12 fractures, I had all kind of a problem, I had a brace on my leg. So teaching cooking was kind of an extension of this, and there wasn't that much competition at the time. And I started, and the cooking school, you know, coincidentally start opening cooking school with cookware shop and all that. So I was asked to go from one, then to the other, and say, can you come back next year? We'll put you on the calendar too. So I had a whole, certainly in the 60s and 70s, that's what I did a great deal of, like 20, 30 weeks out of the year. I was on the road teaching, you know.
So did you like the idea of a television series, kind of?
Yes, I did, certainly, because all of the amount of teaching that I was doing, I could concentrate doing it in one area for a couple of weeks, do all of those, and I had a much larger reward for that. You know, it would be kind of every week changing cooking school from one place to the other. But it was kind of new at the time, you know. Julia had done her series. I mean, the French chef, it was kind of new. And as I say, she introduced me to people at Random House, and I didn't start with them, but it was in the air, and eventually I was asked to go to 2 or 3 places, and it never eventually materialized. And at that point, I was on the road cooking, and I ended up in California at Martin Yan. Martin Yan is a famous cooking teacher too, but he had a cooking school in Foster City. And part of I was doing 25, 30 weeks a year of cooking close in those cooking schools all over the country. And I was at Martin Yan. And he was just starting at KQED, and he asked me, you know, KQED, the PBS station here, they asked me to do a thing on television. Can you come and with me do it? I said, well, if you want, yeah, sure. So I don't know, I think I bought out a chicken, he did something else, we did together. And then Marjorie Poore, they asked me, after, you know, she was the executive producer, she said, you know, we'd be interested in doing something with you. I said, okay, great. So she said, when do you think you can tape with us? I said, well, not before next summer, because I have 40 weeks of class set up all over the country during the year, but I stopped during the summer. So she said, okay, we'll do it. She said, I will have the money in no time at all, which of course she never got the money in the fall and in the spring. And she said, no, it's still on by then. I had been asked a couple of times before, and it never came about, so I didn't really think much about it. And so she said, we're going to tape in the summer. Well, I will have the money before Christmas, which she didn't have. She didn't have it in spring either. So my wife told me, well, are we going to France this summer? We're supposed to go see my mother, whatever. I mean, are you going to do that show? I said, I have no idea. She said, well, don't you have to do all those recipes if we have to do 26 shows? I said, yes. Yes, a good point. So, you know, I called Marjorie, I remember, Marjorie Poore, the producer, and I said, you know, if you cannot get it by the 1st of May or whatever, I forget the date, I said, I cannot do it because I don't have time to do those recipes for. She said, no, but we'll have it. Well, 1st of May came, we didn't have it. She said, give me until the 15th of May. I said, makes no difference. And the 14th of May, I think she called, she said, we have the money. My wife said, you have to do all of those recipes now. So I did 26 shows. So we did it pretty fast, and we taped it in the summer. And they came out in the fall or whatever, and it was the first series, Today's Gourmet was called, and we did 3 series of Today's Gourmet of 26 shows each. And then after it went other, and I did eventually, you know, I don't know how many series I did, 15 series with KQED, you know, so.
So talk about the preparations. Like, you didn't wear a chef's coat, you wore an apron. Like, those decisions about how you would look
Yes.
and what you would cook.
I did not want to present myself as a professional chef that turned people off. I wanted them to understand what I was doing. So very simple recipe, and very often, helping my wife or the friend, certainly Gloria Zimmerman and all that. I would ask, and they say, no, I don't know how to. Very simple thing like technique, or peeling an onion properly, or doing something like that. I say, no kidding. So then I would add that to it, or peeling a carrot, or doing that properly. So I tried to involve a lot of very basic technique to cook with. I try not to cook anything ahead, to do it in front of the camera, to show that it was possible to do it. Try to follow the season, try to get some fresh ingredient, and so forth. And the type of cuisine that I like to do, not too complicated either. And that's what I did. Today's Gourmet. It was at the beginning of the 90s or whatever, so 80s, I forget when. So I wanted to do something fresh, something a bit new, not too complicated, that people could relate to, buying stuff from the market. I use stuff from the market, often with the package of the market, so instead of getting stuff that people cannot get, so I wanted to relate to the people, and it worked out pretty well. So.
How long did an episode usually take to film?
How long did it take to film?
To tape it.
Well, usually we did 3 shows a day, sometimes 4 shows a day, usually 3. So a series of 26 shows usually took like a week and a half, 2 weeks. We didn't film every day. Some days they needed the studio for some other things. So it went pretty fast. I mean, when we started a series, a couple of weeks, and then it was free for another year and a half, and then I did another series. So I did more series with KQED, and of course that became my second home, the PBS station in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. Who were some of the people there that you worked with?
Well, there certainly, the first one was, I just did a show did a show for sometimes my brains.
It's okay.
With Peter Stein,
Mm-hmm.
and Peter Stein for American Master. He was my first producer there, and that was in I don't know, at the end of the 90s or something like that.
88,
So
89 probably.
yes, something like that. Yes, and then I continued, did several series with him, and after I did with what's her name? And
Susie
British
Heller?
producer. Huh?
Susie Heller?
No.
Not Susie?
No, Susie Heller, helped me. I met her there, helped me, and eventually I did show with her. But I did a series actually with her there, and then after it changed again with another producer.
You'd mentioned Marjorie initially.
Yeah, Marjorie Poor was the first one. She was the executive producer, not really working with me. Peter Stein was the producer on that series.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fun. We did the show. We did usually 3-4 shows a day, and to a series of 26 shows, did in pretty fast. Took much longer to write the book, but usually we did. When I came to do the series, I had the book ready, or at least the manuscript of the book, so that we could take from there. Mm-hmm. And so it was. I wanted to show the thing from the basic. I wanted to cut all the vegetables myself. I wanted to show all of the basics so people, I put an apple in the oven or a tart. I wanted to have that same tart come out to do it, not to do a twin where people say, oh, he did that halfway, So yes, we did that, and I think it worked out pretty well, So it was really instruction, that I wanted to give, explaining the process of cooking, not.
You would share some family stories as well. Is that something that you wanted to incorporate from the beginning?
From the beginning, certainly, I always relate to my mother, where I learned how to cook, my aunt and all that. I mean, there was like 10 restaurants in my family, all together through the year, and 10 of them owned by women. So woman cooking was certainly very important in my life. So, and those dishes that I had as a kid, you know, again, and the one that I eventually learned in Paris too, I wanted to incorporate those and explain it in a way that people could understand, do it with product from the supermarket that people could relate to, could do it. So that was my goal. I'm very, you know, pragmatic this way. So I wanted to teach cooking. There's not, and that's what I did, I guess.
Mm-hmm. You featured wine a lot as well. Talk about pairing food and wine.
Yes, we pair food and wine. I thought that food and wine, you know, work together. Although I am not a snob about wine, you know, I usually buy a bottle under $10 or whatever, if you know what to buy. But then I wanted to show how the wine goes, red wine, white wine, with the food. In an easy way, the American wine were coming about at that time as well. So I kind of mixed French wine, American wine, Italian, and so forth. I'm not very particular this way. So yes, the whole experience of dining, the whole experience of the table was important for me to explain, and the part of food in a family, you know, structure with your children, with your family, with your mother, and so forth. So that was, yes, very important for me to explain those type of concepts. You know.
Mm-hmm. We always saw you taste food too, often with your finger.
Yes, I always say, you know, you cannot cook indifferently. You know, you add A and B, you have to taste. Then you move from there, then you have to taste and move from here there. Yeah, I was probably criticized a few times I put my finger in the food. That's what we do at home. I mean, yes, I mean, cooking is a process eventually which is different for different people. You give the same ingredient to different people and you end up with different dishes, you know. So I wanted to show the process of cooking and explain, so I start doing book and explanation and so forth. When in fact there is a paradox here in the sense that when I start with a recipe, there is that great freedom, if you want. You start with an idea. I say, oh, I'm going to put that with it and this with that. I have in my head. I'm going to start. So I start taking A and B to put it, and I taste and I adjust and I taste and I adjust. I move forward. So I have that freedom to go through. But as I record it, it ends up being totally structured, and I give someone something totally structured, which in a sense is the reversal of the process, you know, but there is no way out of it. So if people don't know how to cook and follow that process that I wrote down, they're likely to come out pretty good. And then if they do it a couple of times, then they are free to start changing and adapting it to their own taste. I say, I want more tomato in there, or less of this, more of that. And eventually the recipe becomes your own, you know, fit it to your own. And that's a normal process for me.
How did happy cooking become your sign-off?
I don't really know exactly how it started, but almost at the beginning, I say, you know, people should be happy in the kitchen, you know. So I don't know why we say happy cooking. I did at the beginning, and it became kind of my trademark. Yes, so
it's fabulous. Everyone loves it now. Were you involved in any of the post-production aspects of your show, like the editing and music that's added?
Well, I was, yeah, asked for it, certainly in the question of the music, the style. We discussed it with Peter. It was important for me to see some of it too. Important for me that that Peter or other producer knew about cooking, so that they don't cut important things, which I had done in other shows. And I said, but this is very important. They have to see it at that point. And they leave other things, which for me is less important, certainly in terms of decoration and all that too. So, but I wasn't, you know, in the control room and working on those things. No, It took a long time in post-production. You know.
Now, PBS didn't have commercials, but there were sponsors for programs.
Right.
Were there certain products that you needed to use on your programs or anything like that? No. That's the whole point in working with PBS.
in fact, working with PBS, when I had the food processor, like the Cuisinart to start with, we put a sign on it, another sign, a thing to hide the name. So we hide the name. So not only we didn't not endorse product, but we didn't have the right to endorse product. If I endorse a product, certainly we wouldn't have been able to use it. So that was a great relief in some way to me. It didn't mean that I didn't use the Cuisinart. I love the machine, so of course I use it, or the KitchenAid, or all of those. And eventually some of those endorsed the show, but they never asked me to do anything or whatever. So that was the beauty of PBS. That's why Julia liked PBS too. We didn't really have to endorse or do anything with product. I remember being asked when they wanted me, I can't believe it's not butter. It was a thing at the time, type of margarine, and they say they want to invest in your show. They want to. I said, fine, I'm not going to use it. I just want them to know that I will not use it. So, and they still wanted, and eventually it didn't work out. But that was the beauty of doing it with PBS. That if I had been on commercial television, it would have been the reverse. I said, well, I'm sorry, but they're putting $500,000 or whatever in it. You have to use those products, which I understand, from their point of view. But with PBS, we've done it. I've done this for so many years, 13, 14 series, and I never had to endorse any product. So.
So you said you've made 12, 13, 14 series. Was there one that kind of took off more than the others?
Not really. I did 3 series of so-called Today's Gourmet at the beginning to reflect the food of the time, and after that. I think I did Jacques Pepin Celebrate, I believe. I forget exactly at some point I wanted to do fast food my way. And I remember they didn't want to use that word. So I cannot use fast food. I said, well, that's the whole point. I want to show people you buy soup at the market within half an hour. I still have the thing in the package. I can do a menu, with food from the supermarket. And we did 3 series of those. And those were very successful in many ways. People could see that it was possible. And at that point, it was, in a sense, almost the reverse of La Technique that I did. Because when I did La Technique, La Méthode, I wanted to show people from the beginning. I mean, I went fishing in my pond in Connecticut to get frog. So I could show them how to take the skin out of the frog. I went a leg of lamb, a leg of veal, 50 pounds to break it down in top round, bottom round, eye round, top knuckle, top sirloin, and each of those pieces of meat, I did a recipe with it too. But people didn't have to do that. They could start at the picture 20 when that piece of meat is there and do the recipe, and or with the frog, they can buy the frog done. But I wanted to show that from the beginning. Or I went fishing in Long Island to get skate, to show you how to get the wing out of skate, because you cannot buy the whole skate, you can only buy the wing. And I wanted to show, not that people may do it, but I wanted to do that. So in a sense, fast food my way was the antithesis of this, I start with package from the supermarket with a minimal amount of effort. You do that, non-stick pan too, and people could do a meal in 20, 30 minutes,
How concerned were you with nutrition in your recipes?
The nutrition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things being healthy.
Yes, I mean certainly in Fast Food My Way, and also before in the first series that I did, Today's Gourmet, I did 3 series of those. It was the time when I don't know, the 90s, where people were crazy about nutrition too. So we put the number of calories, all the stuff in this. We put all of that down, and we realized after that people wanted to know all of that, but never use it, couldn't really care less. So, but I wanted to show people that you could do very good cooking with a minimal amount of. People get terrorized of cream, for example, So so I did dishes at the time for the Cleveland Clinic for cardiac patient weight loss. And I remember doing that for them. And I said, okay, I'm going to do that fish, saute and finish with cream. And all I said, oh my God, with cream, you cannot do that. I say, yes, that's the whole point. I poach the fish into some white wine. So by the time the wine boil, most of the calories evaporate. I'm left with a little bit of residual sugar, but very minimal. And then inside I put some capers, some horseradish, and a bit of sour cream. So I have a cream sauce. So I have no butter, I have no oil, I have that. So I have a very minimal amount, much less than grilling. People get crazy about grilling and they put oil all over the place and you have much more calories than this. So I wanted to show people that it was possible to do it this way. Still, people don't really realize. Often when they see people putting cream in, I think, oh my God. And then they put 3 tablespoons of oil. You know, there is over 130 calories in a tablespoon of oil, and you know, 25, 30 tablespoons of cream. So you put 2 or 3, it's quite different. But so I wanted to kind of demystify that to a certain extent, which I try to do in book as well as in writing. You know.
Mm-hmm. Now, we often, we heard your family stories when you were cooking, and then we got to see you cook with family in Cooking with Claudine in 1996. So tell us a little bit about how that program came about.
Well, it came about that after we did 3 series of 2 Days Gourmet and all that, I said I should have someone to play with, that is, someone who would ask me the question that people would want to ask me, why do you do it this way, why this, why that? And I said, well, Claudine can do that. And often people thought that she played a dummy and she knew, but no, she didn't. First, I didn't tell her the recipe to start with. And maybe she had eaten good food all her life, but as a kid, your parents, you never ask how do you do that, or whether she wasn't particularly interested. And she was in college at the time, and so she became the vox populi, if you want, the person who could ask the question that people would want to ask. And she, so we did those series together, which worked out, quite well. Now, from then on, I've moved to my granddaughter, so.
Mm-hmm. And was Claudine immediately open to the idea of cooking on camera with you?
Yes, much more certainly than my wife. My wife did a few shows with me on television. It almost cost me a divorce. She absolutely hated to be on television. She was good when she was on, but she hated to be on television. Claudine, on the other hand, loved to be on television and ask questions, so she could ask the question that people would want to ask if they could, so we worked that into it. And then it worked out pretty good. We did 3 series with Claudine, so of 26 shows each.
And now you're cooking with your granddaughter, Shori. She's been on your newer series, Heart and Soul.
Yes, so we did yes, absolutely. With Heart and Soul, she did several shows with me, and we actually have a new series now, a new book called Cooking with Shori, and with I think we have 36 shows in there, but they are part of the book, if you have, which she did at my house, and so that was fun for me to cook with granddaughter, to bring her into that world of cooking, especially at my age, after 80 years old. Whether you talk to a kid 13 years old, we speak a different language. I may be faster with a knife in my hand, but she's much faster with her iPhone, iPad, and all that stuff. So, so we cook together, and it's a way of communicating, certainly with her, and we had a good time doing it. Not only cooking together, but certainly eating together, and we can bring a lot of things in there. When we cook together, I say, give me some butter. Okay, I want 2 tablespoons there. How many tablespoons you have in that stick? How many sticks in a pound? How many tablespoons do I have in that cup of water? So we bring mathematics, or I say tomato. You know whether tomato, is it a fruit or a vegetable to start with? And how do you recognize whether it's ripe or not? Or I go to the market with her. I say, get me some pear. Make sure they are ripe. Smell them too. And then we go to the garden. I say, get me some tarragon on that chive. The tarragon is a thing like that. Since she was very little, to have fun in the kitchen, and so she got used to having fun with me in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And that's a way of communicating for us. And around the table, then the discussion is extended, and for us it's important.
Mm-hmm. Another of your series that was quite well known was your 1999 program, Julia and Jacques Cooking at Home.
Yes, that was a different program. You know, conventionally, when you do a series on television, I start by having an idea like Fast Food My Way. I did 3 series of Fast Food My Way. So I continue doing recipe at home to catalog those recipes. Eventually, I need 100, 120 recipes to work that out. And by the time we do a television series, the manuscript is basically ready. Not completely, not the introduction, but I mean the idea of the recipe, so I can divide it so that the back kitchen knows what they are going to do and so forth. When we did the show with Julia, we say, okay, we're going to cook and that's it. You know, no recipe basically we add, nothing prepared ahead. So I said that's going to be pretty hard for the back kitchen. They have no idea what we're going to do. So we say we're going to do stew tomorrow, or we're going to do one thing or another, but without any recipe. So we buy ingredient, so we could change at the last moment. You know, we had the ingredient in front of us. So it was a different way of cooking, certainly, which is probably more natural and easier for us, more crazy for the camera because they had no idea what we were going to do, you know. So, more difficult for the prep cook. We had a young woman who took class with me at BU and another one from the French Culinary Institute here in New York who came there to assist in the back kitchen. But it was difficult because we didn't know what to do. In fact, we had all kind of arguments because I went into the kitchen. Right, I said, we're going to do pate. We've got to have a pate ready too. There's no way we can do it and wait. You know, it takes several days or other things like that, or a turkey for Thanksgiving. So, so we had those discussions in the kitchen with Julia at the beginning. She said, I don't want you to go to the kitchen, work with them too. I said, well, you know, we're not going to be able to do the show. And so we did it this way, you know, on the spur of the moment, well, with a minimal amount of preparation at the beginning, and also with no time limit. Conventionally, when you do a show of 30 minutes for PBS, about 29 minutes with credit. So, you know, when I did show the whole series of Today's Gourmet, it was on time, and I would do it. I had 4 recipes, and someone came with a sign that said 7 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, wrap it up. So I said, okay, so it's pretty stressful. When I did it with Claudine, we did several series, I said, I cannot do it with the kids. She's supposed to be the vox populi here, explaining how it's done, and I'm supposed to show it to her. And, you know, I'm showing her how to roll a dough. She's there fighting with it, and I see a guy going back with a sign, 6 minutes, so I push the kid over, grab the dough. So they say, okay, but not too long because it's expensive, so fine. So we did show 8-10 minutes too much, so they had to edit it and fine, that was it. And after that's how we did it. When we did Julia, I think the longest show we did was 110 minutes for a 30-minute show, like 3 times as much sometimes. She said, we're going to cook, when it's finished, we'll tell you. So it was certainly easy for us, for me to do it with a glass of wine. We continue cooking, say, okay, it's over. So there was an enormous amount of editing, which I don't know what happened to all that material, you know. So it was done in a different way, more natural and on the spur of the moment. Why did we put scallion in there? Because they were here on the table and that happened to, so it didn't really matter. As the way we cook at home, you know. So it certainly was fun to cook this way, yeah.
Talk a little bit about
and it took over 2 years, I think, maybe even 3, for the show to come on the air, because they had to extrapolate the recipe out of looking at our show to do the book. This was Random House, Julie Jones, and the guy would call me a year, 2 years later, say, how much sauce did you put in there? Or how did I don't even remember what we did. Are you kidding? So we had to look at it. So it was a different way of doing it. You know, to do that book after, it was complicated. So it took, you know, a couple of years at least to go on the air, even more, because they didn't have the book ready. You know.
Talk a little bit about your chemistry with Julia Child.
Well, you know, as I say, I met Julia in 1960 when I first came. She came to Helen Macaulay there, and I met her, and we became friends, and we spoke a bit the same language. She was in Paris in 1949. I was in apprenticeship, and in 1949 she went to Paris and worked at the Cordon Bleu. Then I worked in Paris in the 50s. In a sense, we spoke the same language, the cooking of the time. She knew the cooking of the time as I was cooking in the Plaza Athénée, Maxime Fouquet, the place I worked in Paris. So she knew the same chef and the same. So when we started cooking together, we, in a sense, spoke the same language. And so it was fun to cooking together. And we wanted to explain the same thing. I was probably too serious for her. She had done television. She told me, you have to lighten up. You know, this is television. People, you have fun. And which was good for me to learn that from her. On the other side, I wanted to show the technique that we did too, and she knew that I knew how to do that. So she said, okay, make sure you know. But at the beginning of the show, she said, okay, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know. She said, okay, write down idea that you would like to do, and I'll do the same. So I wrote 100 idea, I think, recipe, and she did the same thing. I think 4 of mine made it out of 100. You know, it ended up being, and fortunately for me, as a professional chef, fine. If you put it in front of me on the table, I'll cook it one way or the other. You know, it's fine. But with each show, we argue a lot. We fight. I didn't want to do that. The turkey all disassembled. I said, I don't want to do that thing. And we ended up doing that. Or I said, well, do you want to do a show on hamburger? And I said, it was maybe the most famous show that we did, the Master Show. I didn't want to do a show on hamburger, and then after it was very well known. So she certainly knew television more than I do and what people would like, you know. And we started with ingredient, and we went on cooking and arguing, you know, spars if you want, even though she was, well, 23 years older than me. But yeah, we argue. Sometimes we didn't speak for like a day or two. We argue about everything, but we were good friends. We knew the importance of the technique, the importance of doing it that way. But she was certainly, we had sponsor, of course, like Land O'Lake, butter. So she would put a whole stick of butter. I put 1 tablespoon, more butter. I said, Julia, it's too much. She used more butter than even one that I've seen. So one time there is the president of Land O'Lake who come to see one of the show. We taped it at Julia's house in Boston. So Jeff Drummond, the president, said, what are you going to do? I said, Jeff, I'm doing a dough to start with to do a big apple tart, you know, apple galette in the oven. And then I'm going to use the rest of that dough to do a chicken pot pie. We had chicken leftover to show whatever. And then Julia said, I want to do my own dough, which often happened like 5 minutes before we start. I said, great, terrific, fine. So we started the show. I did a dough, but I rolled the dough. She helped me, cut the apple, put it in the oven. And I said, now Julia is going to do her own dough. She said, yes, Jacques is going to do it. I said, okay, fine. And she said, I want you to do it in a food processor. I said, that's a good idea, fine. So I said, 2 cups of flour, a dash of salt, dash of sugar. I said, how much butter you want? She said, I want Crisco. I said, what do you mean? We don't have Crisco. The president of Land O'Lake is there. He said, we have Crisco. She has Crisco underneath. We did half butter, half Crisco. It's the only time in the whole series we use Crisco. We never used, because the president of Land O'Lake was there. So another time, the other sponsor was Jackson, Kendall Jackson. So we had the chef Jackson there with his wife, Barbara Banky, who ended up sponsoring several of our shows. And we drank a lot of wine. So we started the show, we had a glass of white wine, we went on cooking, we drank too. And we finished the show, I forget what we cooked. But I said, Julia, what do you think you want to cook, you want to drink with that? You want a bit of Merlot or a Cabernet Franc or whatever? She said, I want beer. And she had beer underneath. President of, I said, okay, fine. So it wasn't their style to cow to any type of sponsor. But sometime, you know, it was, but it was fun.
Mm-hmm. Would you guys then eat the food that you prepared
Oh
afterwards?
yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing fake. Everyone ate the food, and yes, absolutely, yes. We sit down and. Yeah.
On your KQED shows as well, would the crew eat the food?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, nothing was fake. We all ate the food that we did at KQED. yeah, we put everything on the table and divide the food. Some take some home, some producer, and so forth. Yes.
Now, Julia and Jacques won a Daytime Emmy Award. What did that honor mean to you?
Well, I didn't really realize this as much. Yes, we won that. That was great. I didn't even know, frankly, what it was at the time. Yeah, we won a couple of different things this way, and yeah, I think people kind of relate to that because I don't know. We argue a great deal, but I mean, nothing was scripted or organized. Even the recipe, as I said, we were not even sure exactly of what we were going to do when we started. I knew I was going to do a beef burgundy because she wanted to do a beef burgundy, but we didn't know exactly the way we would do it. Sometimes we change along the way, I say, and sometimes she didn't agree with me. I mean, many times we had argument on stage. She said, like she wanted to do it more in the old style in France. She said, that's not the way we do it in France, she'd tell me, So I said, I don't care, I'm from Connecticut, so.
Now, back in the 1970s, you were actually with Julia on Tomorrow with Tom Snyder when she famously
Yes.
cut herself.
Right.
What do you recall about that taping?
Well, I was actually doing a book tour on a book. I did La Technique, and the continuation of La Technique was La Méthode, for another name for the seconds. They didn't want to call it the same name, but it was a continuation of it. And I was doing a book tour, and I think, in the. Tom Snyder, I was on his show in New York, and he asked me to come a couple of times, and then he moved to San Francisco, to Los Angeles, and he said, do you want to do it with Julia? I said, I'd love to. So I called Julia, and she said, well, I'm going to be there at that point. So and it was the whole show, like an hour and a half. It was a long show. So I'd say, well, what do you want to cook, Julia? I said, I don't care. So what do you want? So they called me. I said, well, ask Julia. So I told Julia, they don't care about the recipe, anything. She said, fine, I'll buy food. So she bought enough food to feed probably 100 people, fill of beef, this, that, too. And we were going to go through and cook one thing or another. And basically that's what happened. So we didn't have anything scripted or organized. So I was on a book tour. So I came from the East. They picked me up at the airport because he was taping the show, which was called The Tomorrow Show, so after Johnny Carson, I think, at night. And he was taping it around 6 o'clock at night, whatever, so like 4 or 5 hours before it was shown. So I arrived just about at that time. My plane, the way it worked out, they had to rush me from there and put the show an hour late, ready to tape. So I arrived, I was late, so they rushed me to put some makeup on me, rushed me to the stage. Julia was there, and we had enough food to feed an army. And I had a knife with me because I was doing a book tour, so going in the morning to do a roast with a tomato or whatever, so I had that knife. At that time, I could take it in the plane. It was a long time ago. So I put it on the counter, and Julia said, what do we have? She said, we have this, that, too. She took the knife to cut a thing and took the end of her finger. She took a piece like this, so I push it back on it. I tie it with a towel, and Tom Snyder said, oh my God, what are we going to do? And Julia said, we're not going to do anything. Jacques is going to cook, I'm going to taste, we're going to go around. I don't want to mention that. So, okay. So I remember we started the show. Julia was in the middle, and I was at the end, and Tom Snyder was 6'7". He was a very tall guy, and Julia was 6'3", something like that. So I said, well, are we by order of size here? And they said, yes. So he asked me, how tall are you? I said, I'm 5'1", I'm a hobbit. So that was the beginning of the show. The second question is Tom Snyder who tells Julia, do you mind if I tell them you cut your finger? She didn't want. So the camera shoot. She had a towel there holding on. And so that's it. So we went on the show, and we tested, and then after that, we went to the hospital, actually. She had 2 or 3 suture, on that thing, and we went to Jean Bertrand at l'Hermitage to have dinner till 1 o'clock in the morning. She had never been there. She wanted to go there. But that mushroomed into a big thing. Saturday Night Live ended up doing the cutting of her finger, It was all over the place. A week later, we were on Catherine Grosby show, the wife of Bing Crosby in San Francisco, and we were supposed to do omelette head to head. All they talk about was her finger, so the finger became a big thing. Yes, that was funny.
Did you watch the Saturday Night Live parody at the time?
Yeah, that was really funny. Yeah, that was really funny. Yeah, she loved it too. Yeah, yeah.
What do you think was Julia Child's most significant contribution to the world of cooking?
Well, she demystified to a sense the world of cooking, I think, because she wasn't a snob at all. You know, I mean, how many times I was with her. Remember one time with Morley Safer here at Sotheby, we did a talk, and you know, people ask her a question, and she said, "That's a real stupid question." Well, Julia could say that to the people, and but if she didn't know something, people ask, "What is galanga?" You know, new at that time like ginger. She said, "I have no idea, Jacques. You know what galanga is?" I said, "Yeah, I think it's ginger or whatever." So she had absolutely no problem if she didn't know something. She was the first one to say. And so she was very open this when people, I think, realized it and appreciate it. You know, so when we cook, it was the same way. You know, she said, "How do you do that?" So I didn't know that, or I know that, or so I think people realized that. You know, there was no snobbery there, no fakery. You know, I mean, it was pretty straightforward.
Another show that you had mentioned that you did was Jacques Pepin Celebrates, which focused more on holiday specials and dinner parties.
Yes, actually, Jacques Pepin Celebrate came out of the best book I probably did, called The Art of Cooking, you know, which was a continuation of La Technique, but with recipe at the end. La Technique doesn't, and all in color. We did 35,000 pictures on that. It took 5 years to do, which broke it down to 2 volumes, each 1,500 picture each, still with the photograph that I work with today. At that time, it was quite different. So it was a very long, took me several years to do it. And at that point, I wanted to reuse it. And they didn't want to re-put it, reprint it, or redo it in a more modern way. So we took the recipe to do Jacques Pepin Celebrate. So it was more in that style, but I redid the picture and so forth. So it was probably a more elaborated type of cuisine, probably at the antipode of fast food my way, which was, you know, doing a meal in 30 minutes and so forth. And that's probably why I have so many books, because we got a new idea to do on a show, so we go with the book doing this, so it's a different way. I mean, I did a book with the Cleveland Clinic for cardiac patient weight loss, you know, so that was very focused. It was one area of cooking. For almost 10 years, I wrote a column in the New York Times called I did a book with that, which I didn't have the same name for the book, but do you have it written?
I don't have the name, but it was recipes that you did for, you know, family of 6 or kind of larger
for a minimal
groups.
amount of money. So anyway, so it was the focus was economy in the kitchen there to feed a family for less than $5-10 whatever at the time, so that was very focused in one area. I mean, the thing that I did with Julia was another area. Fast food my way was another area, and La Technique and all that was, you know, another way of looking at food. In some way, that's why I did probably so many books, because they all had a bit of a different focus, you know. So.
So, would you like to take another short break, or we can keep going, whatever you prefer?
Yeah, we go. Do you have a lot more?
Probably about another half an hour or so.
Yeah? Okay.
We'll keep going.
Yes. See, my brain is starting going because I don't remember the name of that book.
We're almost at the end here.
So, being on television, I think most people find your accent quite enchanting, but was anyone ever concerned about being able to understand you or anything like that?
I never heard the word intriguing about my accent.
Enchanting.
That's very nice euphemism per se. What are you saying? Yes, some do. Some understand me perfectly, and some do note. And that was the importance of learning a language when you're very young. I mean, I don't have too much problem with the language stylistically or grammatically and so forth, but phonetically, yes. And that's the difference learning a language as my daughter did when she was very small, where you learn it, but after you're 20 years old or more, then it becomes difficult. For some people, most people, difficult certainly to learn without an accent. And yes, sometimes people have problem with, I remember going classes somewhere in the South, where a woman, with a stronger Southern accent say, "Man, I had no idea what you're saying," something to that effect. Yes, but in general, I haven't had too much problem with that. No, I hope.
In the 1990s, there was kind of an explosion of cooking shows with the Food
yeah.
Network in 1993.
Right.
Did you ever think of doing something with the Food Network, or were you happy
Yes,
at PBS?
I was asked to go to the Food Network several times. And I did some show with, from Emery Lagasse to Sarah Moulton to many other, but when they asked me to do series with them, I went to see them, and they told me that I could not do PBS if I was going to do with them. And I said, well, I have no reason not to do PBS. At least I don't have to endorse any product or do anything too. So I never did it for that because I didn't want to do it exclusively with them, but I've done with a lot of others, yes, and now the shows are different. As I say, I just did those shows with my granddaughter, and so now they are, on the air in other way, so people have access to show on YouTube or other type of thing. I don't even know how to get there, but.
You've been a guest chef on a number of programs. You mentioned Martin Yan and Rachel Ray, a bunch of others. Yeah. What do you enjoy about cooking with other chefs in that way?
Well, it's fun. It depends on the chef themselves. I mean, usually if it's a friend, it's great, because usually they ask me to do something that they don't do, or show me something that I don't do, and it's fun. Or it's fun. I mean, it's always fun to cook together, So when you cook professionally with people, there is no recipe. You cook, and it's another way of cooking, which I've done. Well, the show that I did with Julia, certainly several shows that we did, we didn't have any recipe. As I say, we cook this way, and it's fun. It's the way which reflect more reality, So if you are with good friends, when I was with Pierre Franet or my friend Jean-Claude or all of those people or Julia, we already had a great time cooking together, cooking for a dinner for people, Stealing, they steal your onion, you steal this one for that, you have fun in the kitchen, enjoy wine and so forth, yes.
There's also a lot of reality competition shows with cooking now.
Right.
Top Chef, which you've been a guest judge on. What do you think of that type of program?
I have done a couple of those, well, not really with Tom Colicchio and all that. It's not really a reality show, and that's fine. But a lot of the other one that I've seen, there is too much antagonism, fighting or with one another too, which doesn't reflect what happened in the kitchen. So when people came to do reality show, if you go to a regular kitchen, at PRC, for example, there with Thomas Keller, you'd be surprised how quiet it is. No one talk. The chef order, say, yes, chef, and you hear the cling of the instrument too. So the camera comes, stay there for 15 minutes, say, I think it's boring. There is nothing going on. Yeah, that's the way it is. When you see the reality show, everyone says, I'm not doing that crap, this, that, too. That doesn't exist in a kitchen like this. You cannot run a kitchen this way. So that's not represent the reality, but for television it's good, so it's not my type of thing, to go to do that type of reality show and yelling at one another or whatever, so no.
The plethora of cooking shows on television now has probably bolstered the idea of the celebrity chef.
Yes.
What does that term mean to you?
Celebrity chef, it's, for me, it's funny in many ways. I mean, there is many people, it's different type of people. There is people who work professionally and cook a certain way, And for many people, it's probably boring to see me doing this the way I do it. They want more hoopla and more yelling in the kitchen, more that type of glamour, which in a regular kitchen doesn't really exist, huh? Because I mean, you order are coming in, you have to produce and all that. There is only one person who orders, the chef, and that's the way it works. So, but you know, I think that someone said there is 400 cookery shows on television now. I don't know whether it's accurate or whatever, but certainly a lot of reality type of show. I haven't seen, that many of them. I mean, occasionally, but I have done some of them, cooking under pressure like this, and it's fun, but it's not my type of cooking, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When did you start to get recognized more and kind of realize you did have celebrity status?
Well, I don't really, well, probably at the airport. I used to do like 40 weeks of class all over the country when I was doing cooking, and I started doing television. And I see someone looking at you at the airport, you can say, oh, no, and you look in the back, say, no, they're looking at me for. So a little bit, but it was kind of gradual. And going to the Food and Wine Festival in Aspen, for example, which I've done over 30 years, so you have those type of platform where people start recognizing you, that cooking, that we all cook together there and have fun, and cooking with my friend Jean-Claude or with my daughter too. When I have a partner in cooking, rather with a friend like that or my daughter too, because cooking with another professional chef, unless it's a really good friend of you, like Jean-Claude, it's a little embarrassing. You don't want to take over, he doesn't want to take over, so sometimes you're not as comfortable maybe as it should be, so.
Mm-hmm. Did you get a lot of fan mail? Did people write into your shows about requests or what they wanted to see?
Oh yes, we get a fair amount of food show when I go somewhere, so people say my mother do. I mean, that's when I feel that I'm getting really old. Yeah, 30 years ago, my mother did 40 years ago. It used to be that people recognize you for doing a show, and now people recognize you for me doing a show with Julia 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I say, oh my God, time flies, yes. Yes. But it's fun. I mean, people are usually very kind and all that. They say, I learned to cook with you in the 80s and whenever.
Mm-hmm. So the most recent PBS show you did was Jacques Pepin, Heart and Soul.
Yeah.
How did cooking on television change between when you started in the 80s to that more recent show?
To a certain extent, for me, it didn't change, because my goal is always to show some technique, to be able to cook within a certain amount of time, a whole menu, or to show. So there is a certain amount of technique that I want to show, some new idea with food. And but the series that I did change. I mean, like you mentioned, the series before, which was very classic, that I did with even the first series, but I did other series, Fast Food My Way, but I wanted to cook within a minimum amount of time, 23, 25, 26 minutes, 4 dishes, to show people that other dishes I did, to show people the technique of other people. Well, I didn't do a series on that for the Cleveland Clinic show, to cook without too much salt or any type of fat or this and that, to show another aspect of cooking. So you can always, in a sense, put your knowledge toward a specific area of food and try to work more in depth to teach something, so.
Mm-hmm. What do you still enjoy about cooking?
Well, cooking is a communication for me, yes, and I'm fairly glutton, so I like to eat. So, when I'm hungry, I'm ready to cook. So there is something which comes back over and over again. And I'm very Cartesian. This way, being French, I like to explain and show people how it's done, something like that. There is always that discovery, whether it's with my granddaughter or with a friend or whatever. I say, wow, that's how you do it. Yes, simply. So it's fun, and it's a communication. In an age of political correctness, you cannot talk about weight or about, religion or about color of skin or about whatever. So food is very, people can talk about food. You know, it's safe.
Are there any favorite dishes that you have, either just for yourself at home or that you love preparing on television?
Well, it's hard to beat bread and butter. You know, I tell you, bread and butter, if you have the greatest bread and the greatest butter, it's hard to beat. But that being said, you know, perfectly roast chicken for me with a salad. I do a class at BU, a cereal class at BU, and one of them I do a roast chicken, a boiled potato, and a salad, you know, to show people how to do it exactly the right way. And because when people do it with you, they want to impress you, they want to say, you know, stay with the basic, you know, doing it properly, and so forth. And so it's a good class. I do it in front of the class, often with my friend Jean-Claude, and then they duplicate the menu for them for another 2 hours. I teach their very long classes, you know. So yes, we do that. I will do that next month actually at BU.
How would you compare teaching in front of a room full of students to teaching on a television show?
Well, it's different. I mean, I'm very Cartesian this way. I want to explain and show why it works out this way. So I try to take my recipe from the beginning to show all of those different breakdown of the recipe. As I say, I'm very Cartesian this way. I want the people to know how it's done. You know, in front of the student, it's going to be quite different when I teach at the French Culinary Institute, for example, where they are professional cook, where it is the place where usually I have the least question. People don't dare to ask you a question or whatever. Which I give a class to at Macy's or whatever for a home cook. I have hundreds of questions, you know, that people ask too. So it's interesting. You think it would be the reverse, but it's not. You know, so, but for me, I do like the process of showing it from the beginning to the end to kind of demystify the process of cooking, you know, which is what I did with picture or with television. Show television, of course, is an ideal media for that, you know, so, and so I enjoy all those years to explain how to do it from the beginning, you know, so.
So what would you say is your most significant contribution to the world of cooking?
Mine?
Yeah.
Well, you know, to a sense, maybe to demystify cooking, to make people comfortable with it, you know, and to bring people together. You know, there is nothing to bring people together than like food. I mean, you eat several times a day, and it goes more with the food, with the sitting together, exchanging ideas. That's probably the most civilized occupation, you know, to cook and share food together. Mm-hmm. You know, during the 17th, 18th century, you know, the king and all that would bring the people to eat together and to other way of politics, you know, and my brain is going.
Oh,
so,
it's okay.
my brain, looking for the name of the point at that time. Who bring the people together, yeah, other way of doing politics, and around the table there are a lot of things which happen which would not happen otherwise, you know, demystify, so.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned one of your current projects is your book, A Grandfather's Lessons, and touring around with Shori.
Yes.
Are there going to be any other TV shows that you think you'll be involved in?
Well, with this we have
The demonstrations.
Yeah, we did quite a lot of show in this, you know, over 30 show of like sometime 8-10 minutes, sometime longer when I show how to do a rose with a tomato or decoration and all that. But we have menu at home that we do this way. I have 12 book of menu like this, going back, I've been married over 50 years, going back over 50 years, where I can see my mother signing at it, my two brothers are dead, many other people in those menus that I did at that time, where we record what we ate that day. I can see Claudine, my daughter, when she was 4 or 5 years old, signing in the menu or doing menu with me. So for us, it's a whole life in those menus. So my daughter is starting doing that many years ago. So write the menu and the guests are signing and saying funny things or whatever. So we have those menus which are very important for us. Sometimes they're illustrated with, like here, those are menus out of book. They're illustrated with some of my painting. And it's a great memento. So cooking with my granddaughter is bringing her a little bit in my life. I mean, we speak a different language when she had her computer and stuff like this now, but in the kitchen she can feel comfortable with me and around the table, and so she can partake of my life more this way and me of hers. So it's a way of getting together a great deal.
Mm-hmm. So just have a few other summing up questions. Mm-hmm. Have you had anyone that you'd consider a mentor in your career?
I have certainly many mentors in different ways in my career. My mother certainly, once my mother was a cook all her life. Another great chef I worked with, like at the Plaza Athénée in Paris, you know, Lucien Dia was there. But even with my mother, my aunt as well, because they were a great cook. But after that, when I came to this country, even my wife, in some ways, cooking the way she does in a certain way, Helen McCauley, Julia, even people that you cook with, you know, leave a kind of an imprint on you of an idea of opening yourself or doing. I mean, I learn even when I cook with anyone, you know, with sometimes you learn what not to do, but you learn something, you know, if you keep opening your mind, you know, with any chef. So yes, I have many mentors this way, you know.
You've talked a little bit about gender. You said you were the first man to go into the restaurant business in your family.
Right.
But most of the head chefs nowadays are still male. What do you make
it's
of kind
probably,
of
I don't know, it's probably a misunderstanding there to a certain extent. There is, I think 12 or 14 three-star restaurants in France, which is the summum. And I would say probably 10 out of 12 are male. True, then there is a two-star restaurant, and then there is one-star restaurant, but the whole series of one-star, two-star, and there is about 72 star, about 300 one-star. So the whole series of star restaurant, 1, 2, 3 star in the Michelin, yes, probably many more male. But this is only like not even 500 restaurants altogether. There is 130,000 restaurants in France. And many of those restaurants, my two aunts, cousin, my mother, to all of those people have restaurants in the country, and there's still many more women who have restaurants than male. It's probably misunderstood in this country. They always think of chef as male, and it's true that in star restaurant it's usually male, but not necessarily. And I probably learn as much or more from, I don't know if there is a woman cooking. The woman cooking is probably more in the area of taste, maybe less in the area of showmanship or decoration. You learn in different way. I mean, people, want to learn how to do an omelette from me. I mean, certainly in my show, Anthony Bourdain insists and he says, never seen someone make an omelette like this. Yes, and my mother doesn't know how to make an omelette like this. She was in the restaurant all her life. That was the professional way of doing an omelette. I do an omelette probably 4 different ways, the way my mother did, and 2, yes. So there is certain type of things, or boiling out a chicken in professional kitchen that you learn to do faster than other type of kitchen. But when it came to the taste itself, there is many. I've eaten in some of the greatest restaurants in the world, and sometimes not as good as the cooking of my aunt or my mother. Taste for taste. Mm-hmm. So it depends what you look at. Certainly, up to a point, you go back to the kind of basic cooking that you learn as a kid. I enjoy certainly much more than very fancy cuisine. I had dinner 2 days ago here at 11 Madison, considered the greatest restaurant in the world. And yes, of course, but in a way that you don't want to eat like that every day, or molecular cooking, is a cooking which kind of surprise you. You have 3 bowls and one of them is liquid inside, the other one is hot, the other one says, wow, how did they do that? After a while, you say, I want a taco and a beer somewhere, So up to a point, you do that. The type of cuisine that I've done, yes, sometimes fancier than some other time, as I go more toward the type of restaurant that I work with in Paris, going back to most of the cooking that I've done. It's very straightforward cooking. I'm very big with economy in the kitchen and the type of cuisine to teach my daughter or my granddaughter or any other people. It's the type of cuisine that I enjoy doing more than anything else. You know.
What would you say is your proudest career achievement?
Probably my daughter, right? I mean, yes, when you have a kid, you know. Yeah, and I've done a lot of book, you know, and certainly when I started doing book like La Technique, La Méthode, which are illustrated manual of cooking technique, I never thought that they would be as successful as they have been. They're in print now, and I did that in 1970. I don't know,
Six, I
no,
think,
no,
was the first one.
1968 or whenever. So, yes, because cuisine has changed a great deal, and I don't even cook the way I did 40 years ago. But the way you do, I don't know, caramel cage or bone out of chicken or sharpen a knife or peel an asparagus is the same that it used to be. So those techniques are pretty standard. And that's why the French Culinary Institute here is pretty successful with people who don't really cook French anymore, from Bobby Flay to you know, you have some of the great chefs in America which have been at the school now and cooks in a totally different way than the French way. But those basic techniques are there, and they exist in France since probably since the 18th century. You know, so that's what you learn to start with.
Do you have any career regrets?
I would have liked to play the piano, you know. And the kitchen, so we call the piano. You know, working the piano, that's what we call the piano. But yeah, otherwise, no, I don't know. When I was a kid, you know, I was not forced into the kitchen. I went there because I wanted to, but I did not really realize any other potential. I didn't think that I could do something else or whatever, or go to college. I kind of exploded in a sense when I came to America. I knew that it was so. I work out, and when I started doing at Columbia, for me, who left school at 13, then I went on and on. I went to Columbia for 20 years, you know, and I could do something else. And at some point, I was teaching literature and philosophy. But then I went back to the kitchen, but on my own level. That is, I had no more complex about it. This is what I wanted to do, you know. And last year, I got a PhD at Columbia, yeah, honorary one, because when I was in the graduate school there, I was doing a PhD, and but they did not want to do. I wanted to talk about cooking, you know, the importance of cooking in life, and but it wasn't something that was done at the end of the 60s. They say, "Are you crazy?" So I left eventually, but I wouldn't be who I am if I hadn't been to Columbia. You know, at least it prevents me from having a complex about not having an education, even though I go back to cooking, but at a different level. You know, so I think I had a good life.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to an aspiring television chef? Someone who wants to cook on TV.
There is no aspiring television chef. First, you have to be a cook in the kitchen, and very often, I have, like last night, I had a dinner here, and there was a young guy which were there saying, "What do you think my son should do? You want to get into the cooking?" I said, "Well, the summer is coming to go to work in a restaurant somewhere, you know, as a dishwasher. And then after, you know, dishwasher, cleaning the floor, getting the vegetable ready, doing that type of thing. If he survives the summer and he still like the kitchen, then there is some hope. Then you go farther." Because it did not exist when I was a kid, because it wasn't glamorous at all, you know. So when you went out in Paris, I went out and meet a girl and go dancing. If they ask me what you do, even though I was the chef of the president in France, I'm a cook. That didn't go very far, you know. That wasn't prestigious at all. So it has changed entirely now. Kitchen people say you're a genius. So certainly for a young chef like this, he's got to taste of what the real world of cooking is. And you know, there is, you know how many thousand restaurants there is in New York? There is about 8 or 10 3-star restaurants. All the rest, you know, or 2-star, the rest are people thousands of restaurants which work in anonymity, you know, and without much glory or whatever. So this is the real world of cooking, you know. So you really have to have the bug and love it to do that. So on a kid who's interested in that, yes, he would have to work behind the stove in small restaurant, do the dishes. I tell you, if I work in the kitchen and you work with me and you are the cook and you are the dishwasher and the dishwasher didn't come up today, I have more problems than if you don't come up today. But I could be in the kitchen and work as fast or faster than the dishwasher because I've done it, or the prep cook or whatever. And so that maybe the glory that young chef expect it to be, but you have to do that to be able to run a kitchen properly, you know, and respect the people who work with you. You know.
So our final question that we ask everybody is, how would you like to be remembered?
I remember as a good cook, I guess, but as a good father, a good husband, as a nice guy, as a good drinker. I'm good at that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today, Jacques.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask if you could hold up the water glass, pretend it's a wine glass, and give a happy cooking to the camera. That would be amazing.
With that?
We'll fake
happy
it.
drinking.
We'll fake it.
Happy cooking.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.